It's that time again. The Infidel Guy Show. Thank you very much, everyone, for checking us out here at infidelguy.com and wherever else you might be. Join us in the chat room at infidelguy.com. You can also check us out at freethoughtmedia.com. Just click on chat there. At Infidel Guy, you will see a community link. Follow the links, you'll see chat room, and join us in there. You can also join us at Stickcam. That's right, you can see a little image there of me, bottom left of the website, a little image there. You can join us in the Stickcam room, and I'll try to address your questions in both places. I'm in there right now. Check out the new video section we have available, by the way. I think you all will like. A lot of interesting stuff, and you can submit your own videos as well. If you're working on any projects and things you want to educate us about, you can feel free to go ahead and do that. It is June 14th, 2006, and once again, I am the Infidel Guy. My real name is Reginald Finley, and you can find out more about me by looking at the FAQ at the website. I think you're going to like this program this evening because I know that this is a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time, and didn't really know much about this individual until I bumped into our guest this evening. And the person I have on the line with us right now is Brian Trent, and he is the author of the award-winning novel Remembering Hypatia, and it's just recently been nominated for Book of the Year by Foreword Magazine. Check that out. Now, the topic tonight is the story of Hypatia of Alexandria. And this is a true story of a brilliant woman erased from history, and it has garnered high praise from Writer's Digest, National Public Radio, and Yale, among many others. So glad to have our guest on the phone with us this evening, Brian Trent. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Brian, I tell you, I read the first chapter of the book, and honestly, it just blew me away. It's very rare I read. I mean, it was like I was reading a movie script.
Okay, that's good.
I mean, yeah, maybe there's a lot of promise there. Maybe there's a lot promising about that. But I mean, the imagery and the description and all those things, it just really just blew me away. And I'd like to tell everyone, oh yeah, I need to give that address out. I almost forgot. Make sure you visit the website at rememberinghypatia.com. And Brian Trent has it's a portion of the first chapter.
It's a portion of the first chapter.
Right.
That's correct.
And I'm telling you, I think you guys will enjoy it as well as much as I have, and maybe we'll get the entire thing. I think I will by the end of this program here. Brian, I guess first of all, we need to talk about exactly who Hypatia of Alexandria is. Who is this historical person?
Well, she was several things actually. She was an esteemed mathematician, an astronomer, a philosopher, a teacher, and the curator of the Great Library of Alexandria in Egypt. The Great Library was the greatest repository for knowledge in the ancient world. It was a 700-year-old library. Mm-hmm. It had each of its halls were devoted to a particular field of endeavor, like invention and literature and history. And this is really a dynamic place. This is a place where you could find a book on geometry by Euclid. You could find books on philosophy by Plato, and they also invented a lot of things at the library. And Hypatia was the last curator. The post had always been held by men, so that alone distinguished her. She was not only was she an accomplished individual, she was also a woman in Greco-Roman Egypt, which was difficult to be in the post that she held. And she was murdered. The historical facts are that she was murdered, torn apart, literally, by a Christian mob, the ringleader of which is now celebrated as a saint.
What?
Yep. He's Saint Cyril. He was the archbishop at the time. Not a very, even if you subtract his hand in her murder, this is a person who drove the Jews from Alexandria. This is a person who, at that time, many subjects were being debated in Alexandria, whether they were scientific or whether they were religious. And even among Christians, there were different sects of Christianity. Would often have these different pluralistic debates. And Cyril was one of the people who would have stopped that. He had a couple of those sects exiled on punishment of death. Mm-hmm. So he's not. This is a guy who had quite a track record before. Right. Before she wandered into his crosshairs. So basically, this is the guy that handed down the order, essentially. But others physically did the. Others ripped her apart. Right. I've said before, at some of the signings I've held and lectures I've given, Cyril is as guilty as Charles Manson, is as guilty as Osama bin Laden. This is somebody who had a direct control over his audience, over his parishioners.
This seems to be the case quite often, isn't it? That
it is.
The Catholic Church they give sainthood to individuals who are ruthless murderers.
When the dust settled, it's the same thing with the decree in the 1500s that basically allowed for the genocide and annihilation of the two South American civilizations that were there, as long as that when the dust settled, you had good Christian men and women. So it's too bad. It's not there. I opened my book with two quotes, both of them from Christian writers, and they show two different very spins on the event. I mean, one by Socrates Scholasticus is saying this doesn't represent the words of Jesus, and this isn't what Christianity is supposed to be about. The other, who's a bishop, Bishop John, revels in her murder and says the death of Hypatia is it was a great blow for Christendom, and so it's Cyril and his people were the evangelicals of the day, and they won, and they gave us 1,000 years of what we very correctly refer to as the Dark Ages. Indeed.
What was so threatening about Hypatia to the church? Why did they think they needed to destroy her?
She was a free thinker. She extreme. There are a few quotes that are attributed to her. One of the quotes that has survived is, "Cherish your ability to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all." And that's a statement that I think should be nailed on every Senate seat in America. It's just the idea of not necessarily being a partisan, being a free thinker. And there's another quote which I think was even more directly threatening to Cyril, and that was that all formal dogmatic religions are fallacious and should never be accepted by self-respecting persons as final. So this is the time period. Now you have to, when you look at historical eras, you line them up side by side. They each have their own zeitgeist, their own spirit of the age, what was vogue, what was acceptable. And when you look at the classical world of Greece and Rome, and this is a phenomenal, arguably the greatest era in history, as far as artistic and scientific inquiry goes. And Hypatia and her library were physical embodiments of that. But in Hypatia's era, that was changing. We were starting to slide over into a new zeitgeist, which was being deliberately orchestrated by people like Cyril, which was really the opposite. You're talking about the total diametric opposite of that, which is more, they're pushing a worldview of blind obedience, of superstition, of not questioning, of keeping your heads in the dark and in the sand, turning. Well, as Mark Twain once said, turning a nation of men into a nation of worms.
Right. Well, I mean, how did this happen? It seems like you have this huge library. It seems to be for, I guess we consider progressive, or at least progressing. How did this occur? How did they get a hold of this woman? How could they? Where were her defenders? I don't understand. How is it possible that the church was able to murder her like this? And where was she killed exactly?
Well, she was killed in a church. She was, the historical record says she was pulled from her chariot and dragged into a church, the Caesarean church. Right, so the old, mainstay of a church being a sanctuary doesn't apply to non-Christians. She was literally ripped to shreds, and most of her works were destroyed, and of course, her body was burned. The remains of her body were burned. They ripped her apart with oyster shells and fragments of pottery, which I have a line in my book. I say they empty these reed baskets of these instruments of murder and then pass them about like an unholy Eucharist. So, and here they're about to commit this murder. But to answer your question, how it happened, it was an issue of church and state becoming combined. It's a clear-cut example of it. We're not talking about religious freedom here. Religious freedom and religious fundamentalism are not two sides of the same coin. They're two different forms of currency. We're looking at an era in which, in 311 A.D., Emperor Constantine, declared that Christianity was the state religion of the empire. Now, prior to this, there was, a religious freedom of sorts. Generally speaking, you could walk around a Roman metropolis and encounter people who worshipped any number of deities. Constantine threw his support behind Christianity in particular, but he did allow for religious freedom. There are a couple exceptions. The Druids and the Jews, they were exceptions to the rule, but as a rule, you could, freedom was tolerated. 80 years after Constantine, in 391, Emperor Theodosius declared an edict. It was June, of June of that year, and he declared an edict that took the next logical, or I like to say evangelical step, which was to just outlaw the other faiths completely. Temples were destroyed of opposing faiths. The parishioners of those faiths were converted at start point, and pagan priests and priestesses were murdered, often crucified, despite the irony. So you have the endorsement of the state, a theocratic regime at this point, and that's why a murder like that was allowed to happen. That's why a murderer like Cyril went unpunished. Socrates Scholastic himself says, not the slightest condemnation, not the slightest punishment befell Cyril. And he said, nothing can be further from the spirit of Christianity than this, but nothing ever happened to the guy. So the times were changing, not because it was inevitable that it falls into the Dark Ages, but because you had state and church combined. They were making laws based not on rationality, but based on theological conviction.
Indeed. So there seems to be a vacillation, it appears, where the library was built as a, I guess, repository of various. I guess you could tell us about that. I'll have you tell me. Tell me exactly again what the Library of Alexandria was about.
Well, it was. I mean, we have to look at the city itself. I mean, Alexander the Great built the city.
Okay.
And it's probably one of the greatest accomplishments that he did. He forcibly united Greek civilization, a Hellenistic tide of science and philosophy, with Egypt. So two of the highest, greatest civilizations in history. And then when the Romans took it over, they added their own faultless pragmatism to the mix. So it was really, and this was not, it wasn't difficult to combine these cultures, actually. I mean, Greece and Rome had a love affair that went on for centuries before Alexander. And adding Rome to the mix, the three together created a pluralistic, multicultural community. Earl Robinson described America once, and he said, all races and religions, that's America to me. Well, those exact words worked towards Alexandria. That's what it was. It was Persians and Egyptians and Greeks and Romans, and people from as far away as India and Gaul would visit Alexandria. So the library was just came out of that. It was built. We don't know exactly when it was built, but Alexander, when he had literally drawn the design for his city in the dust and the dirt of the Delta, he moved on. The city was built. It was probably constructed. The library was probably constructed about 9 years later. And cause certainly that it springs up in history, and it's Cleopatra studied there. It was it's quite a place, and of course it was the place where people would bring ancient manuscripts from Babylon,
different cultures and religions, and and out of that, and this is where I was going to go with that. It seems like we were moving toward an area of enlightenment. Had this huge library. Then we went back, and then the church grew, and then we ended up going back. All of our progress was halted. Yeah. And it's like we're starting all over again. And then there's something that really, when you mentioned that someone made an analogy about America and how Alexandria is much like how the vision of America is supposed to be. And it seems almost as that we're going back into that same direction as well, some could argue. The church has seen, I don't know, it's arguable, but it seems like the church is getting more and more unchecked power. And it almost seems that if they could have their way, we would be having many, many more examples of being burned at the stake or ripped apart because we don't believe in the same things that they believe.
Well, you don't even need to speculate. I mean, you can actually just get it from the words of certain people, like the Pat Robertsons and the Jerry Falwells. They were the first people to say that, so it's not even, you don't even need idle speculation. They're the ones who say the kind of world that they would create. And it's not a world. I find it endlessly amusing. I'm a firm believer in American principles and a fan of the Founding Fathers, and I'm one of the people who realized that the Founding Fathers created America. They created a secular constitution. You know, certain pundits and talking heads can push forth. They can say as many times as they want. They can speak from their podiums and proclaim their falsities about how this is a Christian nation or a Jewish nation or a Muslim nation, whatever they want to say. But this is a nation founded on a secular constitution. The first words of the First Amendment state, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. John Adams himself, in 16 words, should have laid the whole thing to rest when he said, the Treaty of Tripoli, that the government of the United States was not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. There's a difference. We should never be able to shut down a house of worship. By the same token, that's where the religions belong, in the Sunday schools and in their temples and shrines and synagogues and in households. But in public schools, teaching it as knowledge, that's the difference. Unless you're going to be so, when they're talking about freedom and they want to give people alternatives, I find it interesting when they want to teach creationism
but if you
as
don't
an
teach another
alternative to
religion.
science. Right. So what I tell these people is, okay, put your creationism in your school, but to be completely fair, let's teach the Nordic view of how humanity sprang from the maggots of a frost giant. Let's teach the Mesopotamian view, how arts and sciences were given to us by a fish-headed god named Oannes. Let's teach about how Viracocha brought the South America. Let's teach every single thing, along with every kind of prayer, from Buddhist chants to Zen koans. But that's not what they want when it comes down to it.
And then, and I've always joked about this, when would school ever start? If we were to pray to every single god there is that someone believes in it. 888-503-0802. You're listening to the Infidel Guy Show. My guest this evening is Brian Trent. Check out his website, rememberinghypatia.com. So, obviously, we're talking about remembering Hypatia and what happened with her. I have a question from my forum. Someone asked, Hypatia went to study in Athens. Do we know why she returned to Alexandria, where she knew that her views weren't exactly favorable to the masses?
The story of Hypatia going to Athens, we don't know for certain actually if she did go. It's a kind of an apocryphal story. As a novelist, I filled in the blanks and I went with the idea. Yes, she probably did get out there. Athens was one of the big seats of intellect, and I filled in that blank by suggesting what she encountered there. And this is another theme of my book. It's not just about the dangers of fundamentalism and what they've done with the murder of Hypatia. It's also about academic elitism. I have Hypatia going to study as a free thinker, and what she encounters are students of great speakers and great thinkers like Diogenes and Demosthenes and Isocrates, who model themselves exactly on Diogenes and Demosthenes and Isocrates. I guess the modern expression would be ditto heads, people who they don't think for themselves so much as they regurgitate verbatim exactly what was inserted into their minds by their chosen political priesthood. And so I find her getting kind of fed up with it, as well as encountering what she certainly would have encountered, which is the flagrant sexism of the era. I have Hypatia as extremely strong individual through sheer force of personality. She claws her way to the top of this society, of academic society. But when I have her go to Athens, she's still very young, and she has to deal with some disturbing and unsettling sequences.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Just reading the first excerpt, I kind of grabbed a little bit of that already just from reading that. That she was a little upset with, she was obviously, shall I say, dissatisfied with the dogma about, for instance, they should be authoring books in Greek and not Latin. And so there's a little exchange there. And then, of course, you could simply tell by this professor's, just his personality, his whole demeanor just comes across as just arrogant, and you could tell that was maybe just a little bit of I'm better than you kind of thing. You should listen to me. I'm man, you woman, beats chest. And that's kind of
exactly.
I kind of picked that up a little bit. So.
Yeah. It's funny. If you were a woman in ancient Greece and Rome, and your model in life, your role model was Penelope from the Odyssey. It was, ever faithful Penelope waiting for her husband with no authority or power of her own. And then there's Hypatia.
Exactly. Wow. Now, let me give his number out one more time. 888-503-0802. Again, you're listening to the Infidel Guy Show. For those just tuned in, don't forget I am watching the chat room, so if you have any questions there, no problem. I'll be more than happy to type those in. Oh, speaking of which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, 4th of July, since we're talking about Hypatia, in Alabama, if you look up the Alabama Free Thought Association, they have like a 4th of July celebration at Lake Hypatia every year. I'm pretty sure. Are you aware of that, Brian?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
So some of you guys want to look that up and check it out. And I think I might be able to make it this year, so I'll be happy to see some of you guys out there. Okay, so now, do you think that Hypatia's death in some way might have inspired later witch burnings and things of that nature? It seems like, did we get a model from that? Do you think that kind of instigated all of this, or?
I think indirectly. I think it was the start. I mean, George Bernard Shaw said that the the ultimate form of censorship is assassination. And it's very easy to, Hypatia was such a strong force, and Cyril really couldn't hold his own against her. His very easy answer was to completely disregard one of his own commandments, conveniently, and have her murdered. And it just became, power corrupts, and that's what they just started to do. A very specific worldview was forcibly imposed. The population was shackled in fear and ignorance, and the fear was rightful. I mean, people had a right you can't blame them for being afraid. If they spoke out, they would be burned. And it's unbelievable the hypocrisy involved there. But
and they really believe that that's what for some reason, I guess, they really convinced themselves, I should say, that their belief dictates this.
And they still do.
Behavior.
And they still do,
yeah,
very much so.
Need to. I wonder why there's such a divide. Have you thought about the psychology behind why you think people do these types of heinous acts in the name of their God? And what do you think? Fear?
Well, it's part of it's fear, part of it's control, part of it's people. It's just a very old, something very, very ancient that's inside us. It's the same way when wars were fought through history. Mm-hmm. Very, very seldom is credit given to the young men who actually fight and die on the battlefield. Right. It's always Zeus brought down the walls of Troy. It's Marduk gave me victory over the Hittites. So it's just the same mentality. But it's a very wicked mentality, and it's antithetical to to the better fruits of human progress and human nature, which right. I believe in. So.
Okay, well, tell us about your main character in the book. I think it's Thasos or Thasos.
Thasos, you got it.
Yeah, Thasos. Is this a fictional character?
Thasos is semi-fictional.
Okay.
He's not a real. There was no character specifically named Thasos attached to her story, but Hypatia, in addition to being brilliant, all sources agree she was extraordinarily beautiful, and there were many students who fell in love with her very deeply, and of course she was considered to be wedded to science. And I depicted her as a human. She still had human impulses and human feelings, but she really did live more in the cerebral side of her personality, and she didn't tolerate amorous students. So I gave those amorous students, those kind of nameless, faceless people, a name and a face in Thasos. And he takes the reader, really, he's an extremely dynamic character because he changes so much. We're talking about someone who starts off extremely naive and really flesh-centered, interested only in his base impulses. And Hypatia, his affection for Hypatia, I suppose that's one word, is the catalyst for his own transformation. He gets brought into the world. His father was an esteemed scientist at the library, a scholar at the library. And when his father was dying, on his deathbed, he made his son, his young son at that point, swear an oath to give 1 year of himself to the great library. Okay. And then decide whatever he wanted to do. So that's when the novel opens, and that's what Thasos is doing. He's 17 years old now, and by Roman law, he's a man at 17. So he's enacting the promise. He's enacting his promise to his father. And he goes into the library, and that's really the beginning of his odyssey.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you hear it right here. The first hot teacher was Hypatia of Alexandria. Like in the chat room talking about this. Sometimes, as you were talking earlier, I actually started tearing up, and I was a little choked up. It was difficult to talk, actually, just imagining that people can be just that cruel to kill someone, just really because they just think differently. But at the same time, you can kind of see where they're coming from in their mind as well. Fear that everything that you are is in some way going to interfere with God's wants and needs for human beings, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. People are certainly entitled to believe whatever they want to believe, but as looking at the potential of humanity and our brains that allow us to. I have a whole section in there about natural disasters that was written well before Katrina, and it talks about how this is not a soulless view to say that we're not supernatural puppets. That we when waters rise and swallow crops, we count on one another to plant those crops again, to care for our sick, to rebuild homes. It's not about blaming God, and it's not about saying that we need to sacrifice to God like Abraham tried with Isaac. It's about counting on one another. So it is a humanistic approach, more or less, and if there's a God that wants us to grovel in the mud and remain as ignorant as oxen, that's not something I'm going to bow down to. I don't think any thinking individual, anybody who cherishes what we can do for each other, we come up with medicines. Winters try to freeze our blood, we tame fire like little Prometheuses. That's what we do. And whether that spark was implanted in us from God or what, it's not. I will not and cannot respect a philosophy that lobotomizes the human race and has us gazing dully at the world like cows.
I'm curious, as we're talking about God here, what were some of Hypatia's comments about God? Did she make any direct comments about the way she viewed the Christian God in her writings?
Just the one about formal religions. Just the one where she said that all formal dogmatic religions are fallacious and should never be accepted by self-respecting persons as final. That's her one quote, and that was enough.
That was enough, yeah.
That was enough, especially for Cyril.
And I mean, how long did she sit on this? Was this part of this new work that she was working on, that she was writing? You mentioned in a book.
We'll never find out what her book was at that time, what she was working on, because it was destroyed.
Really?
But as it is one of her major fields that she focused on, one of them was philosophy, and I drew what is known about her, and then I extrapolated. With statements like the ones she was making about free thinking and about not necessarily atheistic, just not subscribing to dogmatic religions. And I filled in the blanks of what that last book could have been, which is arguably not primarily about religion. It was about the future of civilization. Her library, keep in mind, there were scientists there who had proposed inventions like the steam engine, who had actually invented a concept of automatic doors that would work in temples. And these were not dull guys. They were extremely, extremely brilliant individuals. And I think she would have had that at her disposal when constructing a possible future, where civilization was going, where she saw it was going. And the irony, of course, is where it ended up. Where did it end up? But we gave her, as Carl Sagan once said, we gave ourselves a lobotomy. The Dark Ages completely wiped out learning and completely set us back. We had to rediscover all these things. We had to rediscover. Eratosthenes was a scientist at the library. He had figured out accurately the shape and size of the world.
Right.
And we had to rediscover that the world was even round again.
Right.
So
amazing. Yeah, and here he was actually pretty accurate considering the know-how, the knowledge. Of course, he didn't know that the Earth wasn't completely round. He believed, let's just say, that Earth was completely round, but now we know differently. But that's why the measurements were off, right?
Right. It was off by just the smallest percentage.
Right.
Exactly. He had measured the distances and sticks and the shadows of sticks and just did the math. I mean, had the distance spaced out and right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
888-503-0802. You're listening to the Infidel Guy Show. Right now we're talking about RememberingHypatia.com with our guest, Brian Trent. A really interesting book. Make sure you check it out. Again, we have Brian posting the number in the chat room, and I really appreciate that. Again, if you have any questions, please type them in red in the chat room, and I'll try to get to those as soon as I can. And, in fact, I think I need to do that right now. But I guess while I'm searching, I'll ask you another question here. What type of impact did Hypatia have on, I guess, let's say the modern world today? Like, what do we owe her credit for? I think you mentioned a few things, but...
Well, I mean, primarily, with a lot of her works being destroyed, and the fact of the matter is, I speak, around the Northeast about this subject, and about halfway through my presentations, I always ask the audience how many people heard about her before today, and the most I've ever seen, I saw 4 hands go up one time, and it's just it's amazing. So her impact, really, she's a martyr for the free-thinking cause. She made the contributions she made to math and to philosophy and so forth. A lot of them have been lost, quite frankly, and will never be rediscovered.
It's kind of intriguing. So when people bring up things like, I'm seeing this woman who has tried to do so much for humanity, and the way she died was just in the most horrific way. I mean, there should be a movie about this. We got this Passion of the Christ. I mean, come on, why not have a movie about this? That's probably what somebody would... I can imagine that being a good rebuttal when someone says, Christ died for you, well, Hypatia died for you, and
yeah.
It seems like it was just as bad, if not worse.
It was a horrible, horrible death.
Yeah.
Horrible murder. And this was conducted by, a crowd that, on one side of their mouth they talk about love and tolerance and peace and so forth, and that's the last thing that they do.
I guess peace by the sword.
Right, exactly.
If you can kill all of your enemies and those that don't agree with you, they believe that there will be peace. And of course, we just know that's just not the case.
Right. Well, it's again, it's something. If there's certainly people are certainly entitled to believe as they will. But as far as combining that with government, not a chance again. It's I talk to people. I have a friend who's Hindu, friend Penelope, and she believes that eating the flesh of a cow is wrong, and that's certainly her belief, and I respect it. Insofar as I have a social nicety, I don't serve her hamburgers when I get together with her. But if a Hindu administration were to get elected in this country, I don't want them passing laws based on the Bhagavad Gita. It's and that's what a lot of evangelicals just will not be. They're not capable of understanding it. That religion, church, and state. We have it very spelled out here. We're founded on a secular constitution.
That's right.
We base laws on rationality, not on theological conviction.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, if I've always told people who try to say that this nation was based on Christian principles, yada yada yada.
Not remotely.
And I tell them, well, think about this, consider this. If this is the case, why wouldn't these advocates of Christianity, many of them, not have more explicit Christian language in the founding documents? I mean, why don't we see this? Obviously, they would say, all praises be to Jesus,
right,
whatever. You don't see that. So
even in the Declaration, which is not the model for American government, the Declaration is just it's a letter to King George telling him that we're going to commit high treason, which I'm glad we did. I mean, I don't support tyranny in any form. It's that letter itself doesn't refer to Jesus or the martyr, or it refers to God. It refers to a creator. It refers to concepts which are not exclusively or even primarily Christian.
Right. Good point. Right. And so, for instance, if a Christian today were to confront him and ask him what his beliefs are, no doubt they'd be completely different. And a lot of people don't realize that. We finally got a first caller in here. Let's take this call. Hello, you're on the Infidel Guy Show. Thank you for holding. And I'm not hearing anything. Okay, guess they're not going to say anything. Okay. Try to call back in. Maybe you had some problems. Maybe you didn't realize you were on the air, but try again. Again, it's 888-503-0802. Luna in the chat room is asking, how much farther along do you think science would be if all that knowledge wasn't lost? Is this something you ever speculated upon?
Oh, many times. Mm-hmm. I mean, just run very conservative numbers. You think of how much we had to rediscover. When you look at like doctors like Galen, who is a super genius. I mean, you look at Galen's tools, this ancient Greek doctor, and you compare them to the tools we have today, as far as the scalpels and all the different things. I mean, the tools are the same. It's just the materials have varied. And what he knew was so radical, what he had discovered. We had to rediscover this. So the biological, the medical sciences would be even we're talking in all likelihood 500 years ahead of time, possibly even 1,000 years. But even if you think of how much we discovered in the last 100 years, be as conservative as possible and say we'll be 100 years in technology. In 100 years, we consider that in the last 50 we discovered a laser and land on the moon and all these different things. It's extremely disturbing,
right,
of how much was lost and how much we had to rediscover.
Now, back to Hypatia here. You mentioned earlier that the church pretty much, in many ways, the early church actually condoned the action of killing her, or I should not condone, but actually supported the murder of Hypatia.
They supported it by silence. Certainly the government did. The church, they admit guy is saint, so they did their own way praise it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay. Wow. Okay, I was going to ask what overt statements were made by
nothing
the church.
Overt, but I mean the fact that this individual itself was made into a saint.
Of course. That's pretty bad in and of itself.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Just makes you want to ball your fist up and just punch.
Completely. But it's just funny that it doesn't even reflect all Christian mindsets. It just reflects that was the one that was advanced, this hard-lined, uncompromising evangelical bloodlust. When you look at Socrates, Scholasticus, and more progressive Christian thinkers, I mean, what they say is correct. I mean, this doesn't represent the root here when you go back to the individual in whose name Christianity was founded. but that's just kind of something that other people like to avoid.
Okay, if we have a call back in, and hopefully we can get this person on the line here. Hello, are you there? I don't know why we're not hearing this person. Hello, let me see if we can help this person out here. Hello, hello. Strange, not getting anything. Hello. Strange, there's something wrong with the line. I tested the lines earlier today, everything was fine, so I guess something strange is going on, but oh well. Let's see, bad connection. Okay, so someone's asking about, there's actually two stories here. Someone's asking about Saint Cyril. Mm-hmm. Is there any truth that Saint Cyril was actually her lover? I haven't heard about anything like that. No.
I've never even come across a myth about that.
Okay.
There's three main documents which refer to the facts behind Hypatia's murder, and then there's a host of different anecdotal stories or apocryphal stories, like going to Athens, which is one I liked it enough, and I thought it could have happened, certainly within the realms of possibility, so I included that. But I've never heard that one before. No.
Strange. Okay, so apparently she's I guess there is bound to be stories galore and rumors because she was so beautiful. But someone else is talking about Orestes, that she had a relationship with him, and then some other people as well.
Yeah, whoever's saying that is actually that's interesting. I don't know if they've read the book or not, but
okay.
The historical record indicates that Hypatia and the governor of Egypt, an individual named Orestes, they were close. Now, and he certainly was brutally attacked by the same Christian mob which later murdered her. And so, how close were they? Well, as a novelist, I was very happy to explore that one.
Okay.
I indicated that certainly there was mutual attraction on both her parts, and I had a lot of fun as a novelist writing the scenes between Hypatia, who is really the supreme leader of her domain, and the governor Orestes, who's just this very stolid, kind of bullheaded individual, but I suppose in more of an admirable way. He means well, and their relationship or pseudo relationship that starts to develop.
Okay. I think we have somebody else on the line. Let's see. Hopefully this will work this time. Hello? You're on the air. Strange. I'm not getting anybody today. Very weird. Hello? Oh, well, I guess looks like I'm start answering the phones. For some reason, the phones are just not getting through tonight. I don't know what's going on here, but because everybody heard me tell them right before the show, but oh well. We're going to keep moving on here. 888-503-0802. You're listening to the Infidel Guy Show. I'm thinking it's the same person calling in, and I think that's why there's a problem. I don't know if this person's playing a joke, practical joke or not, but if you want to try one last time, we can do it as a test and see if we can get this thing working properly. But okay. Where was I here? Lost track. Oh, here we go.
I was talking about Orestes and the governor, and somebody had typed in a specific comment about that.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. A question from the chat room, remember now. Another question by Luna here is asking, how much literature actually survived, from the Library of Alexandria being destroyed? Do we have, how much survived that? Because we obviously knew that there was a library and there were documents, so something must have survived.
Some fragments did. When you're looking at the destruction of the library, and certainly the imposition of the Dark Ages, you need to look at fundamentalist Christianity, and you need to look at fundamentalist Islam. Okay. Muslims took the city in 646. My book takes place in 414 A.D. In 646, Muslims took over the city. The story goes that they destroyed, the Christians destroyed the pagan literature, the Muslims destroyed the Christian literature, so that didn't leave very much left. And this is an era also before the printing press. So any copies of book that existed had to have been painstakingly copied by hand. So some of those books did make it to Constantinople, which was the last great classical cities. In, I think it was the 1400s, when a Muslim army under Muhammad II had assailed Constantinople, a lot of artists and a lot of great thinkers and scholars escaped from Constantinople. They managed to flee before the city was taken, and a lot of them took books with them. A lot of them settled in Florence, Italy, which became the seat of the Renaissance. There's no coincidence that the survival of some of those books helped spark the next great era in history. But the books that left behind, and it's very well known, were destroyed. So it's just the barest fragments. Even from just a literary standpoint, everybody's heard of the story Oedipus Rex, and we happen to have back then a lot of Greek playwrights would write trilogies. So we have all of the Oedipus trilogy. We have Oedipus Rex, Antigone, and Oedipus Colonus, but we don't have Prometheus Bound. It was only the first chapter. There were two other chapters. We know their titles: Prometheus Unbound and Prometheus the Firebearer. But those are lost forever, as far as we know.
Right.
Somebody said it. I don't remember who it was, but somebody had said, imagine that thousands of years from now, some future archaeologist unearthed plays by some guy named William Shakespeare.
Okay.
And they find complete copies of Twelfth Night and A Midsummer's Night Dream. But they hear reference to other things that he wrote, things like Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, and Macbeth, King Lear, and so on and so forth. That gives a good idea of how much was lost.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, if you call in, more than likely when I pick up the line, I don't have a phone screener tonight, so of course if you call in, you'll be hearing me talking to the guest. That's not an answering machine, that's actually me and my guest speaking. Just wait patiently, and we'll pick up the phone and have you come on the air. Okay, we have a question from, let's go back up here. This is like Ewan is saying, have you read Charles Freeman? Quote, The Closing of the Western Mind. It's a book from an Oxford historian advancing the argument that science and rational thinking were eliminated by Christianity and providing plenty of evidence for it. Have you ever read it? What's your opinion on it?
I have it on my bookshelf.
Wow.
Yeah, I have it on my bookshelf. You can even see the cover in my head. I mean, yeah, it's, I think it's just kind of, it's a very obvious and I think a very true statement. I mean, a lot of religions, and again, it's not limited to Christianity, they don't enjoy free thinkers. They don't like people to question beyond their dogma, and it's just, certainly a lot of them thrive on ignorance. I mean, yes, there's been, great thinkers from all different religions, but again, we're making distinctions among the religious crowd here. We're not lumping them all together, but we're saying that a lot of them, particularly the ones who come into power, do so because they're ruthless and because they understand that you control people when they're afraid. It was a great Roman who said it. We fear things in proportion to our ignorance of them.
Right.
Titus Livius, I believe, is the one who said that.
No doubt about it. We see that in the most obvious things every day. Like if you kill a spider that you think is, you just don't understand what it is. It might be a spider that helps get rid of ants in your home for all you know, and you're right. Just because it looks scary and you don't understand it, you seek out to destroy it because you don't understand it. So, and just, they have I don't know, it kind of shortchanges our accomplishments. I mean, as a species, we're phenomenal. We have the most advanced brains in the universe that we know of. What we've managed to do in clawing our way, no natural armor, no fur, no poison sacs. I mean, we don't really, as far as a species goes, I mean, the naked ape is not that impressive. But we clawed our way right up to the top. And it's just, it's insulting to shortchange that kind of accomplishment. I mean, the battles we had with woolly titans of yesteryear, the taming of fire, the construction of cities and of a civilization. And, it's easy to focus on the bad things we've done, and some people like to get, hung up on that. But think of all we have accomplished as a species. Remake the world in our image. The Earth glows at night from space because of us. And we can defeat winters. We can defeat illness. And we're just getting started. So, we are a phenomenal species. And, the idea that we were meant to be, why was, in biblical mythology, why were we punished from threatening to eat from the tree of knowledge? Right. I think that says it right there. Right. The idea that it is true. Yeah, you even see it says, then his eyes will be open and he'll be like us, knowing good and evil and yada yada yada. And it's like, what the world is this? So basically, you have this insecure being who's afraid that we're going to not need him anymore.
Well, that's the thing. And I mean, if you allow for the idea of some kind of creator spirit or oversoul, whatever it might be, I mean, you don't. why would it be? Why would it have assumed the image of a tyrannical, patriarchal human male? It's very obvious where the inspiration came from the earliest warlords, from the earliest kings, going back to Gilgamesh and Lugalbanda and those
That's
people.
Right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yep. Command by fire. Lead people into. Mm-hmm. Yep. You make them afraid of you. You can have them do whatever you want to do. And you're right. We seem to have that same type of system, the same model. And Lena, we got another caller, and hopefully it doesn't work this time. I just tested the line again, and it worked fine. So I don't know. Maybe, like I said, maybe it was a prankster. We'll see. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Z. This is Gunther Bacon.
How you doing, Gunther? You've been trying to get in for a little while, haven't you?
Actually, I tried a couple times and just got in. So.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Actually, this entire subject kind of came to my mind earlier this week, and I've come to accept that there's going to be apologetics on the side of the Christian theist for pretty much everything. And even though it's some of the most ridiculous stuff that I hear, whenever I hear stuff like, "Oh, God doesn't believe in atheists," I see that as kind of a mask of desperation, and I have to wonder, how much longer is it going to be before something like a Hypatia situation happens again? Who's going to be the next free thinker who's going to fall on the Christian sword because in the name of progress?
Well, let's just hope it's not going to be me. But
well, it's already happening in some areas of the world, though. But more on under, say, Muslim swords. I mean, look at the situation that happened over the political cartoons. Look at how women teachers are
sheer
treated.
Ridiculousness.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that's just a cartoon. Right. The Great Library was actually recreated, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. They've recreated it in Egypt, but I mean, they want it to be this classical light, this model of tolerance and moving forward in progress. But I mean, are they going to stock political cartoons? Are they going to stock the Satanic Verses by Rusty? And that's really the question. But I mean, the caller's question, I mean, it's going to happen. This kind of fight doesn't go away. History isn't just monolithic. It's always a battle. It's always a battle. And there's certain times, like during the Enlightenment, when certainly fundamental religious ideas were in the minority. They were kind of a quiet. They weren't in vogue and in force in Europe, we'll say. But right now, it's just a matter of striking a balance.
And also, what I found very disturbing as well was that shortly after we had this big Muslim thing, and everybody's upset about the images of Prophet Muhammad, and they're offended, yada, 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 the Da Vinci Code comes out. And all of a sudden, it's almost like Christians are just out in mass. I know that by the way, I know that not all Christians were upset about this movie. I do know this, but I'm just saying there are many Christians who were very upset about this movie, and it was almost as if they were trying to upshow the Muslims or something.
Well, imagine if now the Muslims were able to do what they were able to do because a lot of their governments are theocracies.
Right.
So if we had the same thing here, that's a great point that you made. It's a great point that you made. Because if we had the same thing here, if we had a biblical theocratic government here, which we get closer to every day,
right,
under the, I'd like to say we have Republicans in charge.
Theocratic
no,
rule.
we have very much theocracy advocates in charge
right
now.
Right. They can make it illegal. They can make it legal to infringe on our freedoms as non-believers. Well, I don't know if you're a non-believer now. But where do you stand on the God question?
And the God question or religious question? The religious question, I'm firmly with Hypatia. I mean, it's just dogmatic religions make no sense to me at all. I respect other people's right to believe, and I love having, excuse the pun, no pun intended, or I suppose pun intended, spirited conversation.
Okay.
But I don't believe there's any one particular. When you look at so many holy books and you look at all the different religions throughout time, it's just, maybe they have little shards of truth and little pieces of wisdom cloaked in metaphor. But as far as absolute truth, not a chance. But it's and that's my view. But I see that Chinese civilization was flourishing for thousands of years before even the earliest Gospels were written or the earliest stories. It's just who has the truth? Well, how about none of them actually? How about these are books that were written by people? But I really do. I truly love having the conversations. I enjoy with people who are willing to. When you have a real conversation about this, it's not about just finding chinks in each other's armor. It's about sitting down, trying to find common ground, and explore things. A lot of people don't know how to do that.
Indeed.
Yeah. Sort of the God question. I'm open to anything in the world. But as a rationalist, I mean, I'll need to see evidence. If there's a claim that there are werewolves, that somebody can do that, well, show me that a metabolic rate can actually transform from one thing to another. Show me something, and then then I'll consider it. But for me, it's just I believe in human progress, and I think that we're our own angels and we're our own demons. And if there's anything else beyond that, well, it's just not relevant to me.
Hello, you're on the air. Yeah, he's playing a game. He's not going to want to talk to me.
That's fine. That's okay.
That's okay. You got me 3 times you're out. I recognize your number, and I'm not going to answer it again. Taking advantage of the fact that I have anybody. Oh, well. It happens.
Well, if he wants to rise to it, he can certainly talk to me.
But yeah, I really do worry about the possibility that in future generations, if not maybe my own generation here, will have to really worry about government-sanctioned religion to the point where we could be attacked, and it could be justified for it. And so here's there's something going on right now. By the way, let's give you a quick little story here. At my website here, there's a particular pastor who's pretty much after me, and he just does parodies of me. He talks about me all the time, and then he justifies it by saying, because he's supposed to be a good Christian guy, he's supposed to be a leader for his congregation or whatever, and the guy says, well, that's just my sinful nature when I do that. So there again, you have this skewed, anti-humanistic, just very immoral, very uncouth behavior by a believer, and they can simply justify it by using theological claptrap, essentially, just by justifying their actions. Well, this is just my sin nature that allows me to do this. God forgive me, and you see this happening over and over again. It makes me wonder, wow, imagine if we had a government who thought that way.
Well, that's the whole thing. You can only have liberty, and very few people actually know what liberty is about. I mean, they really do not understand what that word means. They just, you actually would, you don't have to believe or even agree with somebody, but they do have that. That's what we're found on. It's one of the basic concepts here. You cannot have religious freedom if you do not have a secular government. You cannot have any kind of liberty if you have a religious government.
That's a very good point.
In time, it's just inevitable that in time things get rolled back and they start. I mean, it's just the same battle cry.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what it is.
Exactly.
And the really ironic thing here is I'm a firm believer, in this country, and a firm believer, a grandfather fought in World War II against the spread of fascism. We're talking about a world where I would stand up, chest to chest with these people if somebody dared threaten to close down a church or a mosque or a shrine or a synagogue. Not that I have to believe anything that they believe, or to have to believe that there's a word of wisdom in their holy books or anything else, but they have the freedom to go to those places as long as they're not infringing on someone else's right.
Exactly.
Someone creates a temple to Tlaloc, the Aztec rain god. There was human sacrifice involved there, and I'm not going to support that. But generally speaking, I do support religious freedom. But they wouldn't extend me that kind of courtesy.
That's true. That's a darn shame. That's right. So I will defend someone's right to believe what they want to believe, provided they're not harming anyone in the process. But they say the same thing, but of course, just not being a believer is harm to them. So to many of them, but
it's a big threat. That's fine.
We'll take this last call here. We have 6 minutes till the top of the hour and the end of the show, so we'll take this call. Thank you for patiently holding. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Trisapient, Gold member.
How you doing, Trisapient?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I spent 8 years in the military, so I defended all these guys' right to their opinion. Just glad they won't do it for us. I just wanted to call in and let you know that quote about the works of Shakespeare came from Carl Sagan's episode Cosmos.
Okay.
The episode of Who Speaks for Planet Earth.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
That's where he explains about what happened to Hypatia and Alexandria.
Okay.
Just want to put my 2 cents in.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great website. You guys
thank you.
Good work. Peace.
All right. Bye. I really appreciate the call. Okay.
Absolutely. That's what I was just saying. How much better an illustration can you be there? There's a guy who serves. Who defends the country. You're fighting for liberty. It's done here. It's done overseas, and it's done both. That's what a lot of people don't understand. There's someone who he has free thinking or humanistic or whatever his views are. They're obviously not fundamentalist views,
right.
But fighting for their freedom to believe that. That's what freedom is about. And those are the kind of people who need to be praised, who need to be drawn up as the heroes they are.
That's right. Well, some of us are wondering, if we want to learn more about Hypatia, what would be some of the references that you recommend for us to
There's not many. I mean, again, if you want to look at ancient references, you're looking at, the Byzantine encyclopedias, like, the Suda. You're looking at the Life of Hypatia by Socrates Scholasticus, by Bishop John. If you want to wade into, real hate speech and real the revelry in her murder, you look up Bishop John. Those are the three sources that I drew from in writing the book. And my novel itself, again, is all the major events that happen are accurate. Some of the minor characters are created. But and all the major characters are accurate as well, as far as having really existed and things that happen, truly happened. So, it was. I'm a historical novelist, and I write a lot of different things in history. This thing in particular interested me because of Hypatia. Here's a woman who's just been erased from history, and her story is just really interesting. It's a great time period, and it's a real title fight between rationality and that kind of fanatical bloodlust. And, we're still recovering.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I'm curious, you mentioned, what are some of the reviews you've been getting on your book, and how is that looking, just as far as the popularity of the book, the sales, maybe? I'm just curious about, any movie deals in the works. Tell us more about the aftermath.
Me and a friend actually have a screenplay. I mean, we'd love to get it out there. I think it's something people would enjoy. It would be a challenge. It'd be something that really would be a great thing to put together. Reviews have been great. Reviews have been really enjoyable. I mean, I love the written word. When I write, I try to, fuse poetry with prose. I mean, I want to tell a story. I want to tell it right, and I want it to be. So it's not just about politics or religion. It's about the storytelling, and the reviews have been very good. And Writer's Digest, said, the nicest things about my book. I mean, I have some of the quotes on the website, and I was on Faith Middleton a while back, and she loved the book, and we've had great things said about it, and people really seem to be responding. I mean, and the really funny thing is, and maybe this is something that's very good. I mean, I certainly think it's good. I've received mail, and from a unexpectedly large Christian population.
Okay.
There hasn't been a harsh word. I've had 2 or 3 people specifically single out the same sequence in the book. I have one of the characters in the book, a Christian named Synesius. He wants to confront Cyril about something at one point. He used to support Cyril before he realized how he was, and or more or less he thought he could kind of direct his passion to something more progressive. He didn't realize it kind of blew up in his face. So, but he doesn't get to see Cyril. He gets to kind of see Cyril's messenger boy, who is actually one of the direct assassins of Hypatia later on, a guy named Peter the Reader. And I have a sequence where Synesius rips up this petition he had drawn up in favor of Cyril, and he says, tell Cyril that Lucifer never betrayed the God the way he betrays the message of Christ.
Wow. Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Brian, for appearing on the program to talk to us about Hypatia and
thanks for having me.
The events surrounding that. And, wow, visit his website, ladies and gentlemen, rememberinghypatia.com. Get the book today. Thanks again. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You also. Best wishes.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, there you have it right there. Wow. Interesting program. I really appreciate having him on, and lots to learn and read up on now about this Hypatia person. Don't forget, stay tuned. Coming up next, the Old Time Atheist Hour. I think I haven't looked at the schedule, but I think the Old Time Atheist Hour is coming up next. Check them out right here, freethoughtmedia.com. And don't forget to visit me, the Infidel Guy, at infidelguy.com. You can come in my stick cam room, the video room, if you don't care about listening to the next program. But I encourage you to listen to the next program as well. I'll see you all another time. Thank you for listening and watching In Reason.